A cruel teacher threatens a quiet girl with a cane, humiliating her in front of the class. He mocked her famous father's name. He never imagined that same father, Steven Seagal, was about to walk in. The silence in Mr. Cole Anderson's history class at Northwood High was not the silence of focus, it was the silence of fear. Anderson, a man whose perfectly pressed shirts and rigidly symmetrical ties could not conceal the smug superiority in his eyes, ruled his classroom like a petty tyrant. He believed pain was a valid pedagogical tool and that fear was a synonym for discipline. His newest target was Savannah Seagal. 14 years old, quiet and observant, she had only recently moved to the small Texas town with her mother. Her mixed Japanese-American heritage and her famous last name made her an object of both curiosity and resentment. She did not seek attention, her movements were precise, her posture a reflection of the Aikido discipline her father had taught her since she was a child. On this particular afternoon, she was 3 minutes late. A brief conversation with her art teacher in the hallway had delayed her. For Mr. Anderson, this was not a minor infraction, it was an opportunity. As Savannah quietly slipped into her seat, he stopped his lecture mid-sentence. "Well, well. Look who decided to grace us with her presence," he announced, his voice booming with theatrical authority. "Miss Seagal. I suppose the rules don't apply when your father is a movie star." The class shifted uncomfortably. Savannah simply looked at him, her face impassive, and said nothing. Her silence, her refusal to be baited, only fueled Anderson's desire to make an example of her. He reached behind his desk, his hand closing around the smooth, polished wood of his favorite teaching aid, a long, thin rattan cane. Mr. Anderson held the cane lightly, tapping it against his open palm. It was a relic from a bygone era, a symbol of a brutal form of authority he clearly cherished. He walked slowly from behind his desk, his footsteps echoing in the tense silence, until he stood directly in front of Savannah's desk. "This school," he declared, his voice resonating with self-importance, "will not tolerate laziness. We value structure. We value discipline. Your last name does not grant you immunity from that." He looked around at the other students, a cruel smile playing on his lips. He wanted an audience. "Tell me, Miss Seagal, does your father teach you discipline? Or just how to snap arms for the cameras?" A few nervous titters rippled through the classroom. Savannah's back remained straight, her hands clenched into tight fists under her desk. She met his gaze, her dark eyes steady. Her refusal to cower enraged him. He lifted the cane high. "Let's see if we can get a reaction," he sneered. With a sharp, violent motion, he brought the cane down, not on her, but on the surface of her desk. The crack of the wood hitting the desk was like a gunshot. It landed with a thud just inches from her hand. The students collectively flinched. One girl let out a small gasp. Savannah did not move. She didn't even blink. "You think you're tough, like him?" Anderson leaned in, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "Let's see how tough you are when you're explaining your suspension." He raised the cane again, this time with a look in his eyes that promised the next blow would be more than just a threat. He wanted to break her composure. He wanted to make her cry. He wanted to prove that in this room, his power was absolute. What Mr. Anderson couldn't have known was that his performance was already being reported. Across the room, a boy who had witnessed Anderson's escalating bullying all week had his phone hidden under his desk. With trembling fingers, he had sent a single, frantic text to his older sister, who was friends with Savannah. "Anderson is going after Savannah. With the cane. It's bad." The message, chain-forwarded with lightning speed, found its way to a contact in Savannah's mother's phone, and then, finally, to the one person who could change the calculus of the entire situation. Back in the classroom, Anderson was savoring the moment, the fear in the room a palpable thing he could taste. He held the cane aloft, ready to strike the desk again, to make his point with a final, dramatic flourish. But before he could bring it down, the classroom door creaked open. It didn't swing open, it was pushed with a slow, deliberate pressure. Every head in the room, including Anderson's, turned towards the sound. The air in the room seemed to shift, to thicken. Steven Seagal stepped into the doorway. He wore a simple black coat over dark jeans, his presence filling the frame. His salt and pepper beard was neatly trimmed, his signature ponytail pulled back tight. He didn't have to announce himself. His calm, powerful stillness, the sheer, undeniable weight of his presence, was enough. He was an anchor in a sea of adolescent fear, a force of gravity that pulled every eye in the room towards him and instantly shattered Mr. Anderson's smug composure. "Dad," Savannah whispered, her voice a mixture of disbelief and profound, overwhelming relief. Seagal's eyes took in the scene in an instant, the terrified students, his daughter standing ramrod straight but with a subtle tremor in her hands, and the teacher, Mr. Anderson, frozen mid-threat with a cane held high. He didn't look at his daughter first. His gaze, cold and sharp as obsidian, locked onto Anderson. "I came to see how my daughter's classes were going," Seagal said, his voice quiet, almost too calm, yet it carried across the silent room with the weight of unspoken thunder. "Looks like I showed up just in time for a lesson." Anderson blinked, trying to recover, to reassert the authority that had just evaporated. Mr. Seagal," he stammered, lowering the cane slightly. "I assure you, this is a simple matter of school policy. Your daughter was tardy. I was merely enforcing discipline." "That's not discipline," Seagal replied, taking a slow step into the room. The door swung shut behind him with a soft click. "That's abuse. And I don't care what century you think you're living in." He took another step. "You raise a weapon to my daughter again," his voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl, "and I will make sure you can't raise your hands at all." Anderson stumbled back instinctively, his face pale. "I didn't touch her," he blurted out, a pathetic defense. "You didn't have to," Seagal said. He was in front of Anderson now. Before the teacher could react, Seagal's hand shot out and calmly took the cane from his grasp. Anderson let it go without a fight, as if it had suddenly become red-hot. Seagal held the thin rattan cane in his hands for a moment, examining it. Then, with a sudden, explosive movement that was shocking in its speed and finality, he snapped it cleanly in half over his knee. The second crack echoed through the room, louder and more definitive than Anderson's theatrical blows. He tossed the two broken pieces onto the floor at the teacher's feet. "You wanted to show the class who was in charge," Seagal said, his voice now like ice. "Well," he turned his gaze to the stunned, silent students, "now they know." In the main office, Principal Matthews was startled from his paperwork by the sight of Steven Seagal filling his doorway, with a pale but composed Savannah at his side. Matthews, a man whose career was built on avoiding conflict and placating powerful parents, forced a nervous smile. "Mr. Seagal. What an unexpected pleasure. Is there a problem?" Seagal didn't speak. He walked to the principal's large, polished mahogany desk and placed the two splintered halves of Mr. Anderson's cane squarely in the center. "There's your problem," he said, his voice flat. Matthews stared at the broken cane as if it were a venomous snake. "My daughter," Seagal continued, his voice calm but laced with iron, "was threatened and publicly humiliated by one of your teachers. She was late by 3 minutes. In response, he called her lazy, mocked her heritage, and raised this," he tapped one of the broken pieces, "to strike the desk in front of her." He paused, letting the words sink in. "He was preparing to do it again when I arrived. I wasn't aware of any of this," the principal stammered, his eyes darting from Seagal to Savannah and back again. "You are now," Seagal stated simply. "And now, you will act." "Of course, absolutely," Matthews said, recovering his bureaucratic composure. "We will launch a full, internal review of the incident immediately. Mr. Anderson will be placed on leave pending." "No," Seagal interrupted, his voice sharp and final. "You don't review abuse. You remove it. There is a classroom full of witnesses. There are already videos of this circulating on social media. He leaned in slightly, his presence seeming to suck the air out of the room. "If Richard Anderson is still an employee of this school district by 9 a.m. tomorrow, I will personally ensure every major news network in this country is parked on your front lawn. This won't be a local story about a bad teacher. It will be a national story about a school that protects predators." Mr. Anderson was fired before the school day ended. The district, terrified of the media firestorm Seagal had promised, moved with unprecedented speed. But the victory was hollow. The system, while sacrificing one of its own, began to quietly push back. The narrative started to shift online. Anonymous accounts on local community forums began posting comments. "There are two sides to every story. This teacher was a respected veteran, known for his discipline. Is this another case of a celebrity parent throwing their weight around?" Then, the school board announced its own decision. While Mr. Anderson's termination was upheld, they also issued a formal suspension for Savannah. The reason? Participating in a classroom disruption and leaving class without permission. It was a classic bureaucratic maneuver, a way to publicly assign blame to the victim in order to mitigate their own liability. They were punishing her for being saved. The news was a gut punch. Seagal, furious, wanted to call his lawyers and unleash hell. But it was Savannah who, for the first time, showed a different kind of strength. "No, Dad," she said that evening, her voice quiet but firm. "Let them. They think this will silence me. They think a suspension is a punishment." She looked at him, and for the first time, he saw not just his daughter, but a burgeoning leader. "They've just given me a platform." The smear campaign, intended to isolate her, had the opposite effect. The story of her suspension went viral, sparking even greater outrage. The hashtag #StandWithSavannah trended higher than the one demanding the teacher be fired. People saw the injustice for what it was, a system trying to silence a girl who had dared to be a victim in public. The school board's attempt to control the narrative had backfired spectacularly, turning Savannah from a simple victim into a symbol of institutional betrayal. During her 3-day suspension, Savannah didn't stay home and brood. She acted. She recalled her father's lessons, not the physical ones, but the philosophical ones. When force is met with force, it creates only resistance. When force is met with stillness and purpose, it dissipates. She went to the local Oak Creek Community Center, a small, underfunded building with a dusty gymnasium, and put up a simple, handwritten sign, "Free Workshop, Finding Your Center." A class on confidence, awareness, and de-escalation for students. All are welcome. The first day, 5 girls showed up, all of them quiet, all of them familiar with the sting of being an outsider. Savannah didn't teach them joint locks or throws. She taught them how to stand, how to root themselves to the ground. She taught them how to breathe from their center, how to maintain eye contact without aggression, how to use a calm voice to de-escalate a confrontation. She taught them that their greatest weapon was not their fists, but their unshakable composure. By the 3rd day, her small group had grown to 30 students, boys and girls of all races and social cliques. They came not to learn how to fight, but to learn how to not have to. They were drawn to her quiet strength, to her message that dignity was a shield that no bully could penetrate. A local news reporter, initially there to do a story on the disgraced Seagal girl, ended up filming a segment on the inspiring, teen teaching piece. The system had tried to isolate her, and in doing so, had helped her find her own dojo, and more importantly, her own powerful voice. The community workshop transformed the narrative. Savannah was no longer just a victim of a bad teacher, she was a young leader actively providing a solution. The school board, facing immense pressure from parents who had seen the news segment, quietly rescinded her suspension with a mumbled apology. But the story's final act of vindication came from an unexpected source. Mr. Anderson, disgraced and unemployed, had not learned his lesson. Consumed by bitterness, he began a campaign of harassment, making threatening calls to the community center, trying to get Savannah's workshop shut down. One evening, as Savannah was leaving the center with a few of her students, Anderson was waiting for her in the parking lot. He was not violent, but his words were venomous, his presence menacing as he blocked her path and began to berate her for ruining his life. What Anderson didn't know was that a local news crew, there to do a follow-up story on Savannah's popular class, was already set up across the street. Their camera, equipped with a long-range lens and shotgun mic, captured the entire ugly confrontation. It recorded every threat, every insult, every bit of his unhinged, blame-shifting tirade. It also captured Savannah's response. She remained perfectly calm, protected her students by having them stand behind her, and never raised her voice. She simply looked at him and said, "You did this to yourself, Mr. Anderson. I'm just living with the consequences." The footage was broadcast on the 10 o'clock news that night. It was the final, undeniable proof of Anderson's character. There was no ambiguity. "No," he said, she said. There was only the image of a broken man trying to bully a child who refused to be broken. That was the end of Richard Anderson's career in education, or anywhere else, for good. The story of "the girl who broke the cane" became a national phenomenon. Savannah's quiet strength and proactive response resonated deeply in a country grappling with issues of bullying and abuse of authority. She was invited to speak at a national youth education summit in Washington, D.C. Standing on a stage before thousands of educators, policymakers, and students, she didn't speak with anger. She spoke with the calm, clear voice of someone who had faced down fear and found her center. Discipline, she told the silent auditorium, is not about making students afraid. It's about teaching them to respect themselves. Authority without dignity is just tyranny. And fear, she paused, her eyes sweeping the room, fear is a cage we are not required to live in. Her speech received a thunderous standing ovation and led to the formation of a national student-led task force on school safety and dignity, with Savannah as its youngest advisor. Her journey had come full circle. The man who had tried to make an example of her had, in the end, succeeded beyond his wildest dreams. Back in Oak Creek, Steven Seagal watched the speech on a live feed from his laptop. A rare, proud smile touched his lips. He had walked into that classroom to protect his daughter, to be her shield. But in the end, she hadn't needed one. She had forged her own. He had taught her the principles of Aikido, the art of peace, but she had been the one to take that philosophy from the dojo mat and apply it to the world, proving that the most powerful force isn't a strike or a throw, but a single, unwavering voice speaking a quiet, undeniable truth. The lesson he had come to teach had been learned, not by the bully, but by the hero he had raised. Savannah Seagal took a moment of humiliation and transformed it into a national movement, proving that true strength isn't about the fight you can win, but the change you can inspire. Her story is a powerful reminder that one voice, speaking with calm and dignity, can be louder than any shout of anger. Have you ever witnessed a moment where quiet courage completely changed a situation? Share your story in the comments below. Show your respect for the young leaders who are brave enough to build a better world. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe for more narratives that celebrate the power of the human spirit.